Hi, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to talk about one of the side effects you could experience if you take Sustanon or testosterone enanthate or any other testosterone ester for TRT. What is this side effect that we're going to be talking about that makes many stop taking their TRT and put some people off completely? Well, let me put it in a way that will make it simple for you to understand.
My hair is thinning a bit.
Unfortunately, hair loss can be one of the side effects of TRT, but only if you're genetically predisposed to balding. In this video, we're going to look at the science behind male pattern baldness, why it's caused, the interaction between genetics and androgens, that's the male hormones. We'll also look at what you can do, if anything, and how to stay safe if you do take something for hair loss. As with all our other videos, this is for educational purposes only. So before you take any TRT or any preventative hair loss medicine, always consult with a trained health professional. Now, before we start, let's look at some terms. Okay, so what is male pattern baldness? It can be called common baldness, common pattern baldness, premature baldness, male pattern hair loss, but my favorite, androgenetic alopecia. In this video, we're going to stick with androgenetic alopecia because it sounds sciencey.
Yes, science!
Now, androgenetic alopecia is the most common form of hair loss amongst men and women, but it's more common in men. In fact, 50% of men will experience this form of hair loss by the time they reach 50. Yes, you heard right. One or two of you men who are watching this video right now will begin to show the signs of baldness at the age of 50.
The band.
Going back to the term androgenetic alopecia, I like this term because it does exactly what it says on the tin. It tells us that this form of baldness or hair loss is caused by the interaction of your genetics and androgens, the male hormones. So when these two combine, the result is devastation for your scalp. 50 years ago, the researcher J.B. Hamilton, he made the observation that when genetics and male hormones interact, they can influence scalp hair growth. If we go back even further to ancient Greece, then Hippocrates made the observation or the connection between male hormones and hair loss. He observed that children and eunuchs didn't become bald. So it begs the question, what happened to this eunuch?
But love telling eunuch jokes. Why is that?
Okay, before we go any further, let's look at the actual process of hair loss in androgenetic alopecia. Okay, so when male or female pattern baldness begins, we get thinner and thinner hair replacing the terminal hair, and the anagen or growing phase of the hair cycle shortens, and there's a process of miniaturization of the hair follicles, with the hair returning to a vellus or baby type hair, which is dormant and refuses to grow. It basically stays in the telogen or resting phase. Now, this miniaturization process continues until there is partial or complete baldness. Now, the androgenetic hair loss patterns, the way it occurs in men is we see that, first of all, we get that receding hairline. A fancy term is the frontal temporal thinning. We also get thinning on the top of the crown. In women who suffer from androgenetic alopecia, the pattern is a bit different. You get widespread thinning on the top of the head, but you don't get that receding hairline. Now, this process of gradual miniaturization of the hair follicles is under the influence of the androgens, that is basically the male hormones, especially dihydrotesterone or DHT. Now, it occurs in these areas because there are more androgen receptors there. So an androgen receptor is where the DHT comes in and docks to the receptor. Then it exerts its effects. Now, this miniaturization process is influenced by DHT, as we've said, but it only occurs in genetically predisposed hair. So when DHT comes into contact with these genetically primed follicular units, what we then see is an increase in weaker, shorter and thinner hair with each hair cycle. And when enough terminal hair are in this process of miniaturization, that's when we can notice balding in areas. Okay, so now we've had a quick look at how the balding process works. Let's have a look at the genetics involved. So we briefly looked at the hormone DHT. We'll look at this in more detail later on, but let's get the genetics out of the way. So the thing to bear in mind about DHT, or dihydrotestosterone, is not just present in men and women who are suffering from androgenetic alopecia. It's in all of us. So it begs the question, if it's present in all of us and it's responsible for hair loss, then why are some of us losing our hair and some of us not losing our hair if we all have DHT, which is supposedly be responsible for causing this hair loss? So the reason why this hair loss occurs in people who are suffering from androgenetic alopecia is that they're genetically primed to be sensitive to the DHT. Okay, their hair follicles have been genetically primed to respond to DHT to produce weaker hairs and go through the process of miniaturization. Also, we touched upon this briefly, they have more of those androgen receptors in those areas where there is classical hair loss. Okay, the area of genetics in androgenetic alopecia is not well understood at the minute. At one time, it was thought that if your maternal grandfather was bald, then you would become follicularly deprived. Now there's more evidence, and in many cases, we can see a transmission from father to son.
What are you doing?
Showing your mother the real me.
So there have been a number of genes that have been identified that could be potential causes for androgenetic alopecia, but it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, because not one single gene has been identified that causes androgenetic alopecia in all cases. There have also been variants, we call these variants polymorphism of the genetic code for the androgen receptor itself. Remember, the androgen receptor is where the DHT docks. Okay, so there's not one single gene, but a number of genes are thought to interact to cause the hair loss. So we call this phenomena polygenic. Okay, many genes creating this phenomena of hair loss. So the way these genes combine will then influence how much DHT you have, how many androgen receptors you have in the scalp, and how many follicles are going to be susceptible to hair loss when they combine, when DHT actually enters their cells. And all of that is determined by your genetics. Now,
this is the Seth Rogen gene. It will give you the appearance of being funny even though you haven't actually done anything funny. Hey!
As if that wasn't complicated enough, we also know that the female hormone estrogen increases the growing cycle, or the anagen phase of hair. Whereas we know, we've mentioned that DHT shortens the anagen phase. So we have this yin-yang balance between estrogen, which increases the growing phase or the anagen phase, and DHT, which decreases it. Okay. Okay. Now, all of this, the level of the hormones, the number of receptors, as we said, the susceptibility, or how your hair follicles respond to DHT, and in fact estrogen, that's all your genetics. Okay, so there's still a long way to go before we actually pinpoint the actual causes and come up with some really good solutions for hair loss. Okay, so now we've had a quick look at genetics. Let's turn our focus to the hormones, the male hormones that are thought to cause hair loss, especially the much maligned dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. Testosterone and dihydrotestosterone are known as androgens. They are the male sex hormones. They're responsible for expressing male sexual characteristics. They are what make men big, hairy animals, okay? So they're responsible for expression of things like, you know, for making body hair, pubic hair, genital development, and increased muscle mass.
You look at me. I have the power!
Okay, so androgens, male hormone, then you have estrogen, female hormone, but they're all steroid hormones, and they're based on a 4-ring chemical structure, and the building blocks of this 4-ring structure is cholesterol. Now, if you're taking statins to control your cholesterol levels, you're actually going to decrease the basic building blocks for your steroid hormones, okay? Because we start from cholesterol, we make chemical modifications until we reach testosterone, okay? So if we block the production here, we're going to get less testosterone produced. So it's worth getting your bloods checked to check your testosterone levels if you're on a statin level. Click on the link below. We've made a video to explain exactly how this occurs. So, okay, testosterone comes from cholesterol, but where does dihydrotestosterone come from? Okay, dihydrotestosterone, or DHT, is a metabolite of testosterone. Okay, just as in a previous video, we explained how with a minor chemical modification, you can change testosterone to estrogen. Similarly, a very small chemical reaction is needed to transform testosterone to DHT. Okay, and again, if you want to see how testosterone converts to estrogen, just click on the link below. Okay, so that concludes part 1 of the hair loss series. In the next part, what we'll do, we'll go more in depth and look at the chemical structures of testosterone and DHT and learn how testosterone is transformed into the more potent androgen DHT. So if you enjoyed today's video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't done so already, please support us by subscribing to the channel. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.